See what happens when a military vet discovers a whole new world of podcasting and all. Wait. Am I reading this right? They give a military vet his own podcast show? No, who in the world thought that was Oh, crap, it's still recording. Right. See what happens when a military vet discovers a whole new world of podcasting in the all-new The Birdman Show. Yo, for real, please. Edit that out, man. I need this job. And somebody call my agent. Hey guys, how you doing? It is the Birdman from the Birdman Show. You already know what to do, so go ahead and do it with me one time. That is right. We are here for another episode of the Birdman Show. I'm really excited because we are introducing a new series called You Be the Judge. But first, I gotta say what's up to my people. Of course, y'all know my host, my co-host there, my boy, my brother, Ace. How are you doing?
I'm with Hooker.
Okay. That's...
Enough said.
Great. Okay. Moving right along. Join us for the very first time on this podcast. I don't know if she's done any other podcasts, but if not, then she is now becoming a full-fledged woman on this podcast.
Well, damn, Tim.
I'm talking about podcast world. That's what I'm talking about, podcast world. I don't know what you're talking about, man. This is not that kind of show. Anyways, we are welcoming Carrie, okay, for the first time ever on the Birdman Show. Carrie, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Now, this series, You Be the Judge, was actually brought to us by Carrie. So Carrie, why don't you kind of give us a brief overview of this series as far as what we're going to be talking about?
Has he turned into a robot for anybody else? Because that's all I'm getting.
Are you serious right now?
Okay.
What?
What he said was...
Oh, the video upload was causing problems.
Your video upload?
That's what I said. A video upload was stalled. So I think that's why everything went wonky for a few minutes. Gotta love technology.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good. You're back to normal now.
What the devil? Okay. Anyways, I don't know what's going on. We're having some issues here. I don't know if it's the internet, what is going on. But anyways, my question actually wasn't a question, it was more of a statement. Go ahead and give everybody a brief overview of this series, what we're going to be talking about, and why you found this to be an interesting thing.
So basically, the plan is I'm going to give them very bare minimum information, and it's going to be true live cases that a judge from a book wrote. And I'm giving them bare minimum information. There's everything from homicide to smoking pot to growing pot to everything in between. And basically, we're going to go through the case with eyewitness testimony, evidentiary stuff, closing arguments from both sides of the aisle, and then y'all get to be the judge and tell me what you think the person is guilty of or not guilty, what they should be sentenced to. And then I will tell you what actually happened in real life and see if you're close.
Apparently guilty of not being a full-fledged woman until she came on this show.
I'm talking podcast world here. Okay? All right. She's a newborn baby here. All right. So we're trying to coddle her. We're trying to, swaddle the baby. All right. Anyways. So look, I want to kind of
Carry
get
on.
into this. I want to go ahead and get into this because it's really this is really fascinating to me. Especially when she first talked about it, when Carrie talked about it, and then when she sent us over the case, and I got told her I just wanted the bare minimum of information. I want her to kind of go through it so that way Ace and I can ask questions. If you're out in the studio audience, number one, thank you for joining us for this episode. Number two, make sure you're definitely in the chat and give your feedback on some of the things you might think on these cases that we're going to be going over. So let's go ahead and present the first case. And this one's called Death of a Bully, right?
Death of a bully, yes.
Okay, so State versus James Alford. And this incident happened on August 19th, 2006, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So why don't you walk us through, tell us who the defendant is, tell us who the victim is, and then let's try to get in a little what background you have on those two with this case.
Okay. The defendant is Jim Alford. He was driving the BMW, and I kind of laid it out a little bit so it's easier to follow along because I can't remember who's driving what or anything like that. The victim is Wilbur Forrest, and he was driving the truck. There were two eyewitnesses to the incident. The first one is a Sheila Meskey. She is a neighbor to Jim Alford. And the second eyewitness is a 16-year-old Tom Cunningham. And there were also character witnesses that we'll get into a couple of those. And Alfred actually testifies on his own behalf, and he is a 57-year-old retired Army major. He's been charged with first-degree murder.
Come on, Army major. Dang. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so why don't you present us with the evidence the state has on Mr. Alford?
What the state has on him, or do you want to go straight into the eyewitness testimony?
Well, kind of what does it have the thing for like the opening arguments or anything? Does it have anything for opening arguments?
He was just charged with first-degree murder.
Okay, he was charged with first-degree murder. All right, let's go ahead and get into the eyewitnesses.
Okay, so the state calls the first witness is the Sheila Meskey, the neighbor to Jim Alford. And I'm going to kind of go through this back and forth verbatim because she has a lot of good information. And we'll just kind of go with the flow and see what happens. Do what?
Carrie, just a second. Did you just tell us what the charges were?
He was charged with first-degree murder.
I thought we were supposed to figure that out.
No, you figure out what he's found guilty of or not guilty.
Obviously, Ace has not been in.
So the way,
which is a good thing.
So the way that court works. Okay, so let me break it down real quick. So the way that the court system works is they usually charge you with the highest thing possible. So in this case, it's first-degree murder. But he could also be found guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of manslaughter, or not guilty by on grounds of self-defense.
Okay.
But you always charge them with the highest possible thing because you can always go down, but you can't go up.
Yeah, not a new trial.
Carry on.
Good?
Carry on, Carrie.
Yeah, you have to retry the whole thing. All right. So Miss Meskey, we're just going to go with Meskey. Miss Meskey gets called up to the stand on the morning of August the 19th, 2006. Where did you reside? She said she lives in the same place that she lives now, her house on Hackley Road. And who else lives at the residence? And she said that she's a widow and that she lives alone. The DA wanted to know like the physical nature of the street because the incident started on the street in front of her house. She said it's a big hill with a canyon on one side. I live near the top of the hill. It's a 2-lane street. So one car this way, one car that way. It's a quiet residential neighborhood. And she said on the morning of the incident, she was out front trimming the hedges when she saw these cars side by side coming up over the hill and starting back down, coming towards her house. And he asked her to describe the vehicles, and she said the one on the left was the black BMW. I could tell that because we had a BMW. And the other car was a white pickup. I don't know the model. And the DA asked, was that unusual? And she said, well, yes, it's only a 2-lane road. 2 cars coming side by side like that is kind of odd. And so she explained as they started back down the hill, the BMW pulled over on the shoulder of the road and stopped. The pickup pulled over to his right and stopped beside the BMW. So the pickup was on the road and the BMW was off on the shoulder a little bit. Y'all with me so far? And then she goes on to explain how they were positioned. The white pickup was in the street on the right side of the road, and the BMW was off the road on the shoulder, which isn't very wide to begin with. The DA wanted to know how close the cars were to each other. She said real close, maybe inches between them. And then she explained that she saw the driver of the BMW immediately roll down his window and start shouting at the other driver. He was very angry. And the other driver just sat there smiling and laughing. So the laughing man is the victim. And the gentleman in the BMW is James Alford. And he asked, can you see the faces of both of these men? And she said, yes, quite clearly. They were only about 30 feet from me. And then she explained that what happened next.
Carrie.
Huh?
I do have one question. Now,
Yes.
the just so I've got the picture clear in my mind, she is illustrating this as though she was looking up the hill, correct?
They were coming a little bit back down the hill
Right,
towards her house.
She's at the bottom of the hill looking up.
She's kind of like mid at the hill. It's not all the way back down, so she's like mid.
Okay. So whenever she says on the right side, that would be on the opposite side? Because if they're coming towards her, they would have to be...
The BMW, right. The BMW is in the right lane on the shoulder.
Because I'm not sure if it's her right or their right. It is where I'm just wanting to make sure that I've got my my positioning correct.
The cars are facing towards her, and they're to the right-hand side of the road. Are you good? Next time I will have diagrams. There you go.
You're
There
doing
you
fine.
go.
You're doing fine.
I do better in dictionary anyway.
But they were, one's on the shoulder, the white truck is within inches of the BMW. Basically on the wrong side of the road because he shouldn't be there. Eventually, the driver of the pickup started yelling, and he leaned over and opened his window on the right side. All right, we all together now? Okay. And he yelled something to the man in the BMW. And then the DA had asked, can you point out the man that was driving the BMW? He said, yes, he's my neighbor up on the hill, Jim Alford, sitting right there with his lawyer. So that was entered into testimony that he was, in fact, there. And then the DA asked, now, would you please tell the jury what you saw the defendant do? She replied that he picked up a gun, leaned out the window, and fired 2 quick shots at the other guy. I recognized him too. The DA asked, you mean the victim? And she responded, we all knew him as Wilbur. I never met him personally, thank God. The DA objected, and the judge sustained. The DA explained, Miss Meekley, I shall ask you to keep your personal comments to yourself and just answer the question. Do you understand that? No personal commentary allowed on the stand. And she said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. What was your question?" "How far away was the defendant from the other man when he fired the weapon?" "Oh, I'd say from here to the jury box. So about 7 or 8 feet away." "And what kind of weapon was it?" She said she didn't know anything about guns, but he questioned, was it a handgun compared to a rifle? "Oh, yes, it's not a rifle. It was like a pistol or a revolver or something." "Were there more shots?" "Yes, there were 2 or 3 more." "Did he hit the other driver?" "Yes, I saw the guy slump over. His truck started to roll, and that's all I know. I screamed and ran into the house to call 911. And that was the last thing I saw." "Did you see or hear anything else while you were calling 911? "While I was talking to the police, I heard this boom, like a crash, and then some more shots coming from down the hill." "How many shots?" "I didn't count, but it sounded like 4 or 5, so I'm not sure how many." "The shots you heard down the hill, were they one right after another, or was there a break in between?" She said there were about 2 or 3 shots in quick succession, then there was a little break of a couple seconds, then 2 or 3 more, but she couldn't see anything. This was all just ear witness. "Did you ever see the driver of the white pickup, the one you call Wilbur? Did you ever see him attack or threaten to attack the shooter?" She said, "No, nothing like that. Wilbur just sat smiling in his car until he saw the gun."
Okay.
And then,
Before you continue, Ace, you have any questions right now for her?
No, I'm good right now.
For the love
and the
of
DA
God,
asked, "Did
nice,
you?"
nice freaking pause there, guy. I do have a question now. Later on in this case, are they gonna talk a little bit more about the relationship between um um Mr. Forrest and Mr. Alford?
Yes.
Okay, okay, that's what I need to know.
Mr. They will go into a little bit more detail about Mr. Forrest and the entire town.
Good lord, he's one of them, huh? Okay, all right, all
Hmm.
right.
Yep.
Is that all for the witness, or do you have more?
Um, it's pretty much the same thing. No, there is a little bit more that is relevant that we need to go through.
Okay, continue. I really
Um,
judge right now.
she did say that she never saw Wilbur have a gun in his hand. So that's a big thing. Um, the defendant's attorney takes his turn, and it's a lot of the same back and forth explaining how the positioning was on the street and everything like that. But the next question that's big is, now think back, Miss Meekley. While they were still parallel, didn't the white pickup start to close this distance of 10 feet and veer closer to the black BMW? And of course, the DA had an issue with that and providing relevance, and the judge overruled it and let him go and continue. And she actually had to look back at her witness statement that was given to the police to refresh her memory on what actually happened. And then she said, "Yes, I do recall he did veer to the right, closer to the other car, closer to Mr. Alford's BMW." "And how close did he come?" Less than less than 5 feet. It was within inches of the BMW, but she couldn't recall exactly how far. So there was some back and forth on that. And then at the end, the truck, so close to that the BMW veered off to the side of the road to avoid being struck. And they said, "Objection, that's too much speculation. She's not an expert on driving." And you gotta love court cases and all that fun stuff. Um, and that's pretty much it for Mrs. Meekley.
Okay, so
Because after she ran back inside, she only heard things.
okay, so at that point in time, after she saw the vehicles coming over the hill, she basically went from an eyewitness to an ear witness.
Yes.
Okay, and did you already state about roughly what time of day this happened?
No, it doesn't say
It
what
doesn't say.
the
Okay.
time.
So she was out trimming the hedges. I don't think I could be a judge because I'd laugh at stuff like that. Um.
Oh, I left out the part where she was trying to be funny.
Oh. Jesus. Okay. Well, next time put that in. Anyways.
Okay.
Okay. So she basically witnesses the two cars coming over the hill. Which I guess at face value, when you first look at it, maybe not that strange because it's a two lane road. Maybe one car is just passing the other car, but definitely becomes strange when they're continuing the same speed for a longer distance. Um, not she's not 100% sure what type of gun it was because once again she's not a gun expert or a driving expert according to the DA or whoever. So um, I do you Ace? Do you have any questions for this witness?
How old? Did it say how old she was?
It just said middle aged. That's all it said.
So 21.
And it didn't say whether. Shit. It didn't say
She
whether
was a
she
mid-
wore like corrective lenses or anything.
No. She just said she was a widowed, middle aged woman with a cat.
Oh, she's a crazy old cat woman. Gotcha.
Yes.
Trimming her hedges.
She was just
Yeah.
starting with her
And
cat
she-
collection.
She said that her cat was like people anyway, so they count.
Gotcha. Alrighty then. No. Go ahead and carry on.
Yeah. So that's all
Okay.
with that witness.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead and
It
call.
was a lot of the same back and forth after that.
Okay. Go ahead and call the next witness, which is Tom Cunningham.
Tom Cunningham, he is 16 years old and a junior at the high school. He is shaking, but his voice is clear, so he's terrified. And he lives at the bottom of the hill, but the same hill. So, like, once the car started rolling down, he's down towards the bottom, okay? And he lives with his mom and dad and an older sister. And he was home alone in the living room watching TV when he heard a loud crash just outside in his front yard. So he ran to the window and looked out. And he explained that he saw a car. Well, it wasn't a car, it was a white pickup truck smashed into the tree in our front yard. And the DA asked, "Did you see the driver of the car?" "Yes, sir. I saw a guy in the driver's seat. He was slumped over on the steering wheel." "Was he moving?" "Not that I could tell, no." "So what happened next?" "I was only at the window for a second when this black car pulled up immediately behind the white pickup. So he smashed into a tree, and here comes the BMW right behind him." The driver, Mr. Alford, got up and ran up to the pickup. The DA asked, "Did Mr. Alford, the driver of the black car, did he have anything in his hand?" He said, "Yes, sir, he had a gun. A little gun, like a revolver." "Tell us what you saw him do." "Like I said, he ran up to the pickup. He ran up to the passenger side of the pickup. He pointed the gun at the guy behind the steering wheel and started firing." "How many shots did you see him fire?" "I remember 2 quick shots, one right after another." "Was that window open?" "I couldn't tell, but I didn't see any glass breaking or anything like that." And then as soon as I saw the shots, he ran back to his living room to call 911.
Yeah, I got a quick question.
Um,
In this, it stated that the boy Tom Cunningham was 16 years old.
yes.
It said he was in junior high.
He was a junior in
Oh,
high school.
junior in high school. Okay. Okay. Whew. It's 16. I guess maybe. Okay. Cool. Continue.
He called 911 and ran back to the window, and Mr. Alford was just getting into his car and saw him drive off, going back up the hill.
Oh, so he turned around and went back.
Yes.
Hmm.
Because remember, he's the neighbor to the first eyewitness, Sheila Meskey.
Right. So Mr. Forrest, not Forrest, Mr. Alford got in his car, turned around, and went back the opposite way.
Yep,
Okay.
he went home.
Okay. Went home?
Well, he went in that direction.
Oh, okay. Good God. Okay. Continue.
They started going through about, like, what did you do next? And the poor kid was scared to death. He was nervous. He was shaking. He started stuttering. And he goes, "Did you see the man slumped at the steering wheel?" He said, "Yes, sir. He had a lot of blood on his head and face, and he looked like he was dead." Then the police came, and I told one of the officers about what happened. And then Tom was asked to point out the defendant, and he was able to point out Jim Alford. He was driving the BMW. And he was actually able to identify what he was wearing that day during the incident. He was wearing a gray suit and a blue tie. And then it's time for the defense attorney to get up and question the eyewitness. He said, "Did you know this man, the man who was shot?" And Tom replies, "I didn't know him personally, but I knew about him. Almost everybody in the neighborhood knew about him. They called him Wilbur the Bully." And that's when the DA asked for the statement to be struck, and it was struck from the record, and the jury had to disregard that. And poor little Tom, he started apologizing and freaking out because he didn't mean to say something he wasn't supposed to. The defense attorney said, "Let's do it this way, Tom. Have you talked to people in the neighborhood about him, yes or no?" Tom said, "Yes." "What was his name?" "I just knew him as Wilbur. I never knew he had a last name. Everybody just called him Wilbur." "And having talked to the people in the neighborhood about Wilbur, are you familiar with his reputation in the community for violence or threats of?" The DA steps in again and objects. And then they actually got into an argument where counsel had to be seen in the private chambers of the judge. Basically, the defendant's attorney is arguing it shows the personality and the issues that circled around the victim, and why basically it puts the proper state of mind on Jim Alford. So it kind of shows kind of a reverse character witness on showing what kind of person the victim was.
Okay. So, okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I'll reserve that. Ace, you have any questions before I have her continue?
I've only got one question up to this point, but I don't know if it's going to be covered. Does Jim take the stand?
Yes, he does take the stand in his own defense.
Okay.
Does the comment that was made come out?
Which comment?
The comment that Wilbur said to him that caused him to pull his gun.
Not what was specifically... well, no, that's not true. Yes.
Okay. Because that's the only question I've got at this point is what provoked him to pull his gun, and was it justifiable action from what was said? So that's where I'm at right now. So
okay,
continue.
Okay. So how much you have left on Tom?
that's pretty much it with Tom.
Okay. All right. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a quick recess. I just want to say that. We'll take a quick recess. We'll be right back. I'm going to test this out. Just give me a quick thumbs up if you guys get it. If not, then we'll jump right back in. So we'll be right back with more of the Birdman Show. You be the judge. So that was a quick recess. I'm having some issues with the audio. I don't know what's going on. It was working just fine earlier, but for whatever reason, when we get ready to do this, it just stopped. So whatever, we'll get it figured out. It is what it is. You know how we do here on the Birdman Show. Speaking of the Birdman Show, welcome back to the Birdman Show. I'm your boy, the Birdman. Go ahead and do it with me one time. That is right. We are in the court of the flock. We we are doing a new series right now called You Be the Judge. We've been having some issues with it so far, technical issues, but it is what it is. We're still rocking and rolling with it on this very first episode of this series. And we're talking about the court case entitled Death of a Bully. It's the state versus James Alford. Incident happened August 19th, 2006. There was basically what's turned into what it's kind of almost sound like either a road rage type incident, in which the defendant, Jim Alford, was driving his BMW, got into an altercation while driving with Wilbur Forrest, who was driving his truck. And during this incident, Mr. Alford pulled out his gun, shot into the truck, shooting Mr. Forrest, in which he then crashed his truck into a tree. And then Mr. Wilbur Mr. Alford pulled up on him, pulled out his gun again, and you say you shot him again, right? Okay. So we just went through the first couple of witnesses. What I would like to do now, let's hit a couple of the other witnesses. I know you have Elaine Cunningham, which is I'm assuming is Tom's mother.
Yes.
Okay. And then you have Margaret McLeod.
Yes.
Okay.
Ellen and Margaret's testimony, along with the 13 more unnamed witnesses, they're pretty much the same.
Okay. All right. So let's go through Ellen's accounts, which is Tom's mom. Now, well, I will ask this: where is Margaret McLeod in reference to? Does she live on the same street, or was she driving by?
Ellen, Margaret, and the 13 other witnesses that weren't named in the book, they are all basically character witnesses. They did not witness any of the incident.
Okay.
All the eyewitnesses were Miss Meskey and Tom Cunningham. That's it.
Okay, so that's where I really
And I
wanna
do
come
have
to.
one more that I forgot to mention when I emailed you guys. It's also the doctor that performed the autopsy.
Okay, let's
He
let's
did
hear
take
from the
the
doctor.
stand.
Let's hear from the doctor before we get to the character witnesses.
I am not going to try to pronounce this man's name, so I'm just going to call him Doc.
Doc.
Um,
Great.
he did an examination and an internal and external of the head, chest, and abdominal cavities. It was done to document any trauma and natural disease present. In general, he found a number of bullet wounds, both entry and exit, where the bullet went through one part of the body, out the other. Otherwise, he appeared healthy. And the DA asked how many entry wounds were there altogether. 8 in all. 2 went through his head. The other 6 went through the chest and abdomen. Most of the bullet wounds entered the right side. And for the record, Doc, what was the cause of death? Multiple gunshot wounds. He does go through and identifies photographs of the deceased and shows diagrams with the bullets and all that stuff. That's not in this book, and I wasn't even going to attempt to do anything with that for this. So, Doc Doctor, from your report, I noticed one bullet struck the right cheek and went through his head. Is that correct? He said, that's correct. And that bullet was fatal by itself, was it not? He said, yes, that one shot was fatal or lethal by itself. That's true. And this is the defense attorney. And he said, that bullet would have killed the victim instantly. Is that correct? He said, yes. Can you tell which bullet or bullets were fired first? And he said, no, I cannot say which one happened in what order. And then he asked about the distance the shooter was from the victim by the nature of the wounds. And the doctor replied, no, there were no powder burns such as that would occur at close range. I can only say that he was not close up, which eyewitness testimony backs that up. The defense attorney asked if the fatal shot to the head was the first shot, and the victim would have been dead when all the other shots were fired. And of course, the DA took issue with that, and the judge overruled it. And the doc said that's probably correct. If the shot to the head was the first one, then the victim would have been dead or close to it when the other shots were fired. So yes, one could say that. And then they interview the police that showed up on the scene, but there's not really any new information there. He went to the victim. They're always the first priority to see if, they can save a life or something like that. But when he got there, Mr. Forrest was dead on arrival, so there was nothing that they could do. And then once they got through that, and he was done examining Mr. Forrest, Mr. Albert pulled back up in his BMW. And he said, no sooner than I had exited my unit, a gentleman came out of a house nearby and approached me. He came up to me and said, I'm the man you're looking for, officer. Did he do or say anything else? He said, yes, he reached into the pocket of his jacket, pulled out a gun, it was a .45, and handed it to me. What did he say? He said, you may want this. The detective pointed out the defendant, basically saying that's the man that did all this stuff. And he said, did you ask him any questions before he spoke? He said, no, nothing. He just started speaking voluntarily. What did you do next? He said, I arrested the defendant, handcuffed him, and took him into custody. That's when they started examining the scene. They examined the gun. It was a .45 caliber revolver, and it still had 2 bullets that hadn't been fired. It holds 7 bullets altogether. So if 10 shots were fired, the shooter would have to stop and reload in order to fire any more. Is that correct? He said, yes, that's correct. They asked if he could determine how many shots were fired in total, and he said they found 4 cartridges up on the hill. So at the top, the first incident, there were 4 casings, and 6 down below. So once he rolled down the hill and hit the tree, there were 6 more, 10 altogether. So in this case, if the shooter fired a total of 10 shots, that would mean he had to stop after 7 bullets were expended, take the time to reload the weapon, and fire again. Is that correct? And the officer said, yes, that's correct. And then he goes on to talk about how Mr. Alford did during the arrest, and he said, no, he never tried to resist arrest. He was very cooperative. He asked, did he show any remorse? And he said he had tears in his eyes when he came up to me. When he sat in the police car on the way to the station, he started to break down and started crying. Did he say anything? He just kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh God, what have I done? And that was pretty much the gist of what the police officer had to say that was the first on the scene.
Oh, sorry. I was reading the comments. My bad. No, Mama Bear, he did not have 4 billets in the second clip. Now, for those who don't, who may not know, who may not be versed in firearms, a revolver, it has a chamber that it kind of it rolls, basically it rolls. So in order to, this is what's really different about revolvers versus semi-automatic weapons, or handguns like you would normally see in a movie or whatever. With a revolver, well, with a semi-automatic weapon, you do have a clip or a magazine. This is what most people call them, and you have a button on the side, which is the magazine release. You hit that button, the magazine drops out, and then you're able to slap one in, slap another one in, cock it back, and just continue firing. So it's pretty quick to do. A revolver, unless you have like a speed loader, you have to individually load those rounds in. I'm not going to say that Mr. Alford did not have a speed loader on him, but the chances are pretty good that he probably did not, which means he had to individually load those rounds into that revolver. Um, so wow, okay, but he did show remorse after he was when he first came up, and then after he was in the police cruiser heading to jail. Okay, Ace, do you have any questions?
Uh, the only question I've got is what the fuck?
Right?
But I'm sure that question will be answered here shortly. So I will refrain and say not at this time.
Okay. All right. So what I'm gonna say at this time, like for the ones that are watching the audience, definitely, once again, definitely keep your comments coming. If you have any questions about the case, make sure you're bringing those up. That was a good question. Mama Bear getting some clarification on what was going on with the firearm. But yes, if you have questions, definitely bring them up. What I'll do is I'll leave some time at the end of the episode to answer any questions in case anybody has any questions about some things before we give the verdict. And we'll try to answer those questions moving forward. Um, and we'll go with that. Okay, so we've heard from Sheila Mesky. We've heard from Tom Cunningham. We've heard from the doctor, and we've heard from the police officer. Okay, so let's get into some of these character witnesses. Let's go ahead. I want you to go ahead, even though you said that they're both about the same, as long as with the other 13 unnamed ones. Let's get the two different perspectives of Mr. Forrest, not Forrest, Alford, as far as character witnesses from Elaine Cunningham and Margaret McLeod. So let's get into what their perspective of um, Mr. Wilbur was, Mr. Forrest.
Okay, so the first character witness is Ellen Cunningham. And I'm hearing an echo. Is it better now? Yay! Okay, it's better. The first one is Ellen Cunningham. And they asked, the defense attorney was the one to call her up initially. So it's his witness. She said, he asked, did you know Wilbur Forrest? And she said, I only knew him as Wilbur. We had a name for him, but I understand I'm not allowed to say it here in court. The defense attorney asked, have you talked to the neighbors about him? And she says, I certainly have. We're all afraid of him. And of course, she got chastised for that. As a result of discussing him with your neighbors, did you form an opinion as to his reputation for violence or threats of violence? She said, yes. She said, please tell the jury what that reputation was. And she responded, it was awful. I'd like to say it again. We were all afraid of the man. And the defense attorney said, have you formed your own opinion on Wilbur Forrest's character for violence or threats of violence? And she said, I certainly have. He's threatened me enough times. And she asked for clarification or he asked for clarification, and Miss Cunningham replies, a few times he forced me off the road when I was driving. And she explained, one evening, about 2 months before the shooting, my husband and I were going out to dinner with another couple. Her husband was driving and she was sitting up front with him, and the other couple were in the back. We had been friends with them for years. It was dark out. Suddenly, a pair of headlights appeared in our rear view mirror. The car behind us was closing rapidly. It got so close that I thought it was going to hit us. I told my husband to pull over to let him pass. So my husband pulled off to the shoulder and stopped. The car behind pulled over in front of us and stopped, so we couldn't drive forward. My husband asked the driver if there was a problem, and the driver said, "You know what the problem is, and don't." Must I say the exact words, Your Honor? I've never said it before. Apparently, this is a very devout woman who does not cuss. um, and the judge said, yes, we need the exact language that was used. And she said, well, I'm embarrassed to say it, but he said, don't fuck with me. I know where you live. And then he drove off. Who was the driver? It was Wilbur Forrest. He looked very agitated. Was there a second time a similar incident occurred? The next time I was driving in the neighborhood alone, the two-way road, he was coming towards me in the opposite direction. As he came near me, he veered into my lane and was coming straight at me. I had to suddenly swerve off the road to avoid a crash. He slowed down to laugh and then drove on. And there was actually a third incident. I don't even know what's going on over there. And there was a third incident where she was driving with her son Tom, and then basically the same thing happened. He came towards me again on a two-lane road. Again, he suddenly veered into her lane and was heading straight at her car. She had to veer off the road to avoid a crash, but she almost hit a tree this time. And he threw something at her car as he went by. And basically that's the crux of what it was. This man tried to run her off the road on at least 3 separate occasions.
Okay, so my question is, okay, so he tried to run her off road at least 3 different times. Did she ever file a report of any type?
No. But I'll get into that.
Well, do continue, please.
So the next witness is Margaret McLeod. She testifies that she is a teacher at an elementary school and she lives in the same neighborhood as the defendant. It's a really small town from what I can gather from this information. I think most of them live on the same street or in the same neighborhood. But she goes on to say that there were several instances involving Mr. Forrest. The first occurred about 6 p.m. on the day previous November. She was driving her car with her husband and he began to tailgate her. She slowed down and pulled off the side of the road to let him pass, but instead he pulled alongside her car and started pushing her further off. And she testified that she was frightened because there was a steep hillside to the right and she managed to drive off, but Forrest again began tailgating her, and this time he pulled in front of her and stopped, blocking her way. He eventually drove off, and a second time when she was driving alone, when he came at her with his white pickup, at the last minute he moved out of the way. And the third time, she was riding with her 17-year-old daughter, and he did the same thing. So he really likes to play chicken in the car.
So did they? I know this happened in 2006. Did they say how long he had been retired?
How long he had what?
Been retired.
No, I don't think so.
I was
Maybe.
wondering because I had joined in 2004, so I was wondering if I actually ran into this jerk. So I don't know, but it sounds like a lot of them I ran into when I was in the military. I'm sorry, continue.
No, wait.
Uh-huh.
You've got me confused now, Birdman. So Wilbur is the retired military
sorry,
guy?
I'm
is the
sorry,
retired.
I meant
That's what I thought. He said, "How long has he been retired?" And I was like, "Wait, I thought it was Alford was in the military." Okay, continue.
Okay, so to answer an earlier question, did you take any actions as a result of these incidents? And she said, we had several community meetings with the neighbors and the police. We needed help. There were about 30 of us at the first meeting. The man had us all terrified. We didn't know what we would do next. The police were concerned and listened to our complaints, but they couldn't do anything. Basically, she goes on to retell the story of, we tried to get help from the police, but there was nothing they could do because there was no physical assault. It was just a guy driving like a jackass, basically. He never waved a gun. He did make vague threats, but at the time, the police couldn't do anything. That's basically what they're told in these community meetings. This is 2006, so don't give me that look.
Well, I mean, the look I was giving because I was just still a little, even though it was 2006, they still had harassment laws in place. So
Yeah,
she's
but they're
doing that, and
harder to
there's that many
prove.
people coming forth and complaining about it. You would think they would do something.
Mm-hmm. Um, and it goes through, there's 13 additional witnesses. They're not named. Their testimony is not given in the book, but it basically is the same thing every single time. Um,
I'm
and
sorry,
then the
I
next one
really
on the
couldn't help.
stand
Hey,
is
man, bro,
Mr.
can't be scaring me like that, bro. I got these headphones in, man. You know, my PTSD kicked in right then, man. I was like, "What?" I was about to combat roll out this chair, man, and go get my machete.
Why you gotta scare him like that? Oh, okay. We're gonna ignore you now. And the next witness called to the stand is Mr. Alford himself. So before we go through this, do y'all have any questions?
I don't know if I got any questions, man. 'Cause let me be honest, my brain I'm a little razzled right now because I just had like 4 flashbacks with that little ruffle sound there. I thought I saw a cow there for a second. I thought I was gonna have to take out. That's another story for another time.
Like I've got a couple of questions.
Hmm.
The first question is, granted, there was no physical damage, there was no personal damage, but it's still a nuisance. There is a law out there that covers public nuisance. And from what I'm gathering, that's what he was in this community, was a public nuisance.
Yes.
And the police could have done something in that aspect of, I don't want to say punishing him, controlling the situation by addressing the fact that he is a nuisance, and if they get any more reports, then they're gonna take him in or whatever. But I don't see how the police force can completely disregard everything that he's doing to this entire community.
I will say
There
this.
are
First of all, let me ask this question. Where was this? Did it say where this was at? Okay, it doesn't say. Okay. So
it had to change specifics to protect people.
okay, no, that's cool. That's cool. Because I mean, we can all agree that even though it's pretty much the same law across the board, every state, every town, every city pretty much kind of makes up their own playbook when it comes to a lot of things. Angel brought up a very good point in the group chat, and she was talking about when she was working in law enforcement, and back then she said that they had to they actually had to physically see it happening. Um,
Yes.
before they would actually do some things. Um, so I don't know. Like I said, I get that, and I'm 100% with Ace on that. It's like, yo, okay, I get if maybe it's maybe one, maybe two people, but you get 30 people that are basically saying the exact same thing about somebody. Like my grandma used to say, and I know other people probably had people say this to them, where there's smoke, there's fire. You need to go check it out. Even if you have somebody start patrolling that section of road, at least do something, become a presence, so that way you can maybe hopefully avoid something like this. Because I'm starting to feel like all that could have been avoided had someone within, whether the law enforcement or somebody within the city council or whatever, whoever, would have taken some type of initiative, and really number one investigated it, and at least I would say at least investigated to the point where you kind of put pressure on the person to where, okay, now they're watching. Okay, now I've seen 3 or 4 patrol cars going up and down this road. Maybe I need to chill out. But that didn't seem to happen. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Continue. What else you got?
So there's a couple things I want to point out. We don't know where this is. So it could be a very small town where there's literally a whole two cops. We don't know.
Maybe.
As far as the harassment thing, a lot of the larger cities started that, but usually when it gets down to the smaller jurisdictions, the little tiny ones, it takes them years to catch up with the laws of the bigger cities. So that might have been another factor that took place. Like some place like New York or LA or Nashville, they might have been on top of it, but if you got little small podunk Kentucky hills, God only knows where this place is, they probably didn't have anything like that. All they had were traffic violations. And in that case, the officer would have to witness it in order to do anything about it. And to answer you, Mama Bear, no, it does not say what Wilbur did as like work. All right, y'all ready for the major's testimony?
Let's rock it.
All right, so he is a retired Army officer. He was a major. He was in the U.S. Army for 27 years, and he is currently 57 years old. Um, and he was actually decorated for combat service in the Vietnam War. He received a Bronze Star Medal. Um, and the defense attorney goes on to ask, "Did you shoot Wilbur Forrest?" And the major responds, "Yes, I must have." "What do you mean?" He said, "It's hazy in my mind, but I know from the evidence that I did." And the defense attorney says, "Tell the jury, why did you shoot him?" And Mr. Alford responds, "I was terrified. When he said, 'You and your whole family will be dead,' I just lost it. I know I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I didn't know what he would do next. I was just afraid for my family." Um, then there's a lengthy testimony, and this is directly from the book, about how, like, basically step by step of what happened. How he shot him at the top of the hill. He followed him down the hill where he crashed into the tree and shot him again. So the eyewitness testimony that was given was 100% correct. He verifies it. And then he goes back and says, he basically goes on to explain how the entire neighborhood was frightened of him. And the defense attorney asks, "What did he do just before the shooting?" He said, "First, he forced me off the road on that hill with the deep drop on the side. He stopped next to me, and I turned his wheels towards his car. I opened my window. His was opened on the passenger side, and I yelled at him." And he said, "Well, what did you say?" And he said, "You're crazy. I've had enough of you," or something like that. And the defense attorney said, "Well, what did he say?" And that's when he said, "You and your whole family will be dead." And the defense attorney said, "What did you think when he said that?" And the major responded, "I knew at that point that he was just going to harm me and my family." And the defense attorney asked, well, when was he going to do that? And the major said, right at that moment, right then. So he thought if he was an imminent threat to him and his family right that second.
You know what? I must. I listen. I'm telling you right now. After hearing this, I already know what my verdict's gonna be. But that's okay. Um, so okay. Mm, I'm sorry. I'm just because after you said that, my mind started going off on a little tangent because of my experience in the
Mm-hmm.
military. So I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna let you continue. I'm remind everybody, please make sure put in the comments what you think this case, how this case should turn out. Already got a couple. And I know I've got at least Mama Bear that has replied as not guilty by reason of self defense. Let us know what you think this is going to be because, like most court cases, you start formulating your idea of what how it's going to end, and then you start hearing more of the evidence, and you're like, oh, you know what? Okay, continue, please. This is starting to get juicy.
um, the defense attorney said, well, what did you do when he said that? And the major responded, I don't remember firing the first shot, but I was very scared, and that's when I must have shot him. And the DA then took over. That was all the defense attorney had. The DA asked, was it an accident? And the major was like, was it? Well, what do you mean? You know very well what I mean. Did you shoot and kill Wilbur Forrest accidentally? And the major responds, well, no, obviously not. The DA responds, obviously, so you meant to shoot him. And the major responds, yes. The DA said, you meant to kill him. And then Alfred responds, I don't remember thinking that. I don't remember what I was thinking. And they basically go back and forth. He's basically trying to say that everything was intentional. And Mr. Wilbur, Mr. Alford, the major, was just saying, no, it was a heat of the moment. I was scared for my family and myself. Um, and then he goes on, you prepared for the shooting, didn't you? And then the major responds, yes, I had a gun, if that's what you mean. And the DA said, was it loaded? Well, yes, it was loaded. With a bullet in the chamber? The major responds, yes. And I do want to point out that it was a revolver. There is no chamber. Once it has bullets in it, it's loaded. That's it. There's no chamber. It's not a semi-automatic. That made me go a little crazy when I was reading this first. Um, and he said, you had it in the car beside you in case you saw him, right? And the major responded, no, I had it for protection. And you intended to use it on him, right? And he said, if I had to, yes. So that's it. You only intended to shoot him if you had to. And the major responded, yes, that's right. And the DA, of course, says, did you have to on this occasion? And the major responds, well, I thought so. Um, was he attacking you when you fired? He said he had just forced me off the road. The DA said his car was stopped. He said, yes, his car was not moving. He said, no, but it was pointed. And he said, no. Just answer the question. Was his car moving, yes or no? No. So at the time, both vehicles were in a stopped, non-forward moving position. And the DA asked, did he have a gun? And he said he didn't see one. He admitted that he could not see a weapon in the victim's hands. He was not physically attacking the major at any point. He said, thank you, you've answered the questions. Now you say the only reason you had the gun was for protection. And the major responds, yes, to protect my family and myself. The man was a menace. The DA asked, how many shots did you fire? I don't remember, whatever the detective said. The DA said he found 10 shell casings altogether. So you fired 10 shots. And Mr. Alford said, yes, that must be right. And you want us to believe that you needed to fire all 10 shots for protection. Like I said, I don't recall what I was thinking at the time. And it goes on basically It fires 7 shots. Yes, that's correct. The detective found 4 casings up on the hill and 6 more below. That's more than 7, right? He said, yes, it is. So you had to reload the weapon, didn't you? And Mr. Alford said, yes, it seems so. When you went down below, you found Mr. Forrest's truck smashed up against a tree. He said, I don't remember that. And he basically is trying to get the major to remember what happened, but the major just keeps saying, no, I don't remember that. I don't remember that. I can't recall. I think he was at a state of shock at that point. Um, he said, why did you reload your gun? He said, I don't know. I'll tell you why you reloaded, Mr. Alford. You took the time to reload it because you wanted to make absolutely sure he was dead. Isn't that so? And the major responds, I just told you, I don't remember that. Um, and that's pretty much the essential. That's it. It's a little bit more back and forth of trying to get him to loosen up and say something, but he just kept saying, I don't remember why I did this, or I don't remember why I did that.
Okay. Ace, do you have any questions?
He is writing like a madman.
I'm writing my verdict down. um, so basically, after Wilbur said what he said to Mr. Alford, he basically went into a state of he blacked out, basically, right?
Yeah, there's 3 states: fight, flight, or freeze, and he fought.
Right. Okay. No, I don't have any further questions. Do you have any questions, Tim, or do you want to go to closing statements?
Yeah, I have a question. Was Mr. Alford ever diagnosed with PTSD?
I don't believe it ever talks about that. I think it just goes on to. No. It basically goes on to. And it doesn't really go over the closing statements as much as I thought it was, but it basically is a recap of the witnesses said this, the character witnesses says this is the facts. Um, and even the defense attorney basically says no, he was protecting his family and himself because he was in fear of his life.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, I asked that because I already kind of knew the answer to that because you had stated earlier that he was a war veteran from Vietnam, right? So chances are
He
he
got
probably
the Bronze
never had
Star.
been diagnosed with PTSD, but it sounds like those are all the classic telltales of someone who had a, um, I guess, a reaction. And especially when you're talking
I
about
believe at that
threatening it.
time, I believe at that time it was called shell shocked.
Yes, it was.
It existed. They called it something else, either shell shocked or battle fatigue.
Yeah. Which was just the tip of the iceberg when they actually finally started really breaking it down, doing the studies of it, of what really can
Correct.
kind of go through. Because that, trust me, that's one of the reasons why I don't go out in public as much. Because I'm be honest, I'm scared of a situation like that. Okay. Let's go ahead. And oh, you got something, Mace?
What was it you said that he did in the military again?
He is a retired major. That's all it said, and he received a Bronze Star in Vietnam.
Okay, so it didn't say what field he was in, what his specialization was.
Don't believe so.
I would probably say if he got a Bronze Star, a few of the MOSs that he can get that from would be infantry, a field medic, um, field artillery, quite
He
possibly.
said he was a retired Army officer retired major, and he served for 27 years. That was it.
Yeah, well, if he was in Vietnam, like I said, he could have been infantry officer. He could have worked for the medics, like I said, because there was a lot of medics that a lot of medics around that time got Bronze Stars for saving people's lives, especially out in the battlefield. Could have been field artillery, like I said. He could have been one of the. He could have been in the uh, up armored unit, like tanks. There's quite a few things that he could have done that would have warranted or given him that Bronze Star. So that would be another interesting thing. But there was a lot of guys from Vietnam just because of everything that was going on over there. Like I said, my father was in Vietnam, and just hearing some of those stories, and he wasn't one of the guys that went outside the wire. But there was a lot of stuff that happened still that he had to experience. So okay, you got anything else, Ace? Before we have her go ahead and do the okay. So here's what I want you to do, Carrie. I know you said the closing arguments don't really kind of go too much in depth. Kind of just gives a summary. Go ahead and give us the summary of the entire case. Okay. Once you give us the summary
Okay.
of the entire case, then I want you to read the four outcomes that could come from this case, the definition. So we're looking at first degree murder, second degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, and self defense. So kind of give us a brief summary, and then say, okay, so here's the choices for the verdicts, and then give the definitions for those for us, please.
Okay. So the first one up is the defense attorney. He really goes in pretty good on this. So, you and your whole family will be dead. Forrest shouted at him after almost pushing Alfred off the road into a deep canyon. Alfred knew the man meant what he said. He knew he was like a bomb about to explode. What was he to do? There were every reason to believe Forrest was about to carry out his threat immediately. His whole demeanor, the threat he shouted, and Forrest's car pointed right at him only inches away. He had a reason to be terrified, all right, because of what Forrest had done before. Forrest had already forcibly maneuvered him off the road 4 times in the past, and he had similarly shunted elderly women off the road, dozens of them, laughing at them while he did so. But now he was threatening to do much worse. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, we were not there. We did not have to live through it. And those among us can fully imagine raw fear that gripped the neighborhood, unless we were there ourselves. A fear created by evil actions of this one man. Who can say what Jim Alford felt when the man told him he would kill him and his entire family? This jury speaks for the conscience of the community. Jim Alford did everything he could to avoid this confrontation. Twice he organized the neighbors and went to the police to plead for help. Little was done. Jim Alford knew Wilbur Forrest was out to get him because he was the leader in the community's struggle to stop the violence. What are you going to say to Jim Alford in your verdict? Are you going to say, sorry, but you should have waited until Wilbur pushed you off the cliff before you acted to defend yourself? Are you going to say, Jim Alford, you should have waited until Forrest killed your wife and the rest of your family before you took action to protect them? No, ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to leave your common sense outside that courtroom door. Do the only thing that is based on reason and good judgment and common sense. Find Jim Alford not guilty.
Okay, yeah, he really did go in on that one.
He did.
Jesus. Um, kudos, my man. He must have been watching Madlock. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead with the.
So next is the DA. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let's put one matter to rest right at the start. I am not here to offer a sweeping defense of Wilbur Forrest and his actions. He did some bad things. He was wrong to force those people off the road. Yes, he frightened many persons in the neighborhood. If he broke the law, he deserved to be charged and punished for what he did. Wilbur Forrest was a nuisance, and more than that, a bully. I concede all of that. But that does not make it right to kill him in cold blood. That doesn't make it right to fire 8 bullets into his body, some of those fired when he lay helpless and bleeding and dying in his truck. No, that is not the American system of justice. It is not the American way to say it was all right to murder. Wilbur Forrest, just because people disliked him, that's not the law. Wilbur Forrest was still a human being and a citizen with certain unalienable rights, as for our founding fathers put it, first among which is the right to life. I know some I know I know you feel some degree of sympathy for James Alford. Under the circumstances, that's understandable. But you promised at the beginning of this trial you would follow the law. And the judge told you that under the law, you must put any feelings of sympathy aside and judge a case based on the evidence and the law of homicide. That is all I ask you to do today. The defendant is charged with the murder in the first degree, a willful, deliberate, premeditated killing, and ladies and gentlemen, he is guilty of that charge beyond any reasonable doubt. The evidence supports every element of his charge. Willful. This was no accident. He admits it. Deliberate and premeditated. This was no sudden impulsive act. He was prepared for it. He carried a gun with the intent to shoot Wilbur Forrest if, as he says, he had to. So he thought about shooting and killing Wilbur Forrest beforehand. That's deliberate and premeditated right at the start. The gun was loaded and ready to fire at the slightest provocation. The gun... Yep, I already read that. But even if you still have a question in your mind when he fired the first shots, what did he do next? He decided to get out of his car and fire again. 4 shots altogether at the first scene. But now comes the clinching evidence of deliberation and premeditation. He doesn't stop after he sees the victim slumped over the wheel and bleeding in the head. No, he decides to follow Forrest down the hill and gets out and fires again at a helpless dying man. Does he stop when all the bullets in his gun have been fired and the gun is empty? No. He makes a conscious decision to reload and then fires again. That, ladies and gentlemen, is deliberation and premeditation beyond any doubt whatsoever. Self-defense, this is not a self-defense case. The law says that the right of self-defense only applies when one is actually being attacked. The attack has to be immediate, right now, not a promise of attack in the future. Defense counsel wants you to twist the law and say that no one can use self-defense when the other party threatens to attack. According to defendant's own testimony, Wilbur Forrest said, "You and your whole family will be dead." Will be. That's in the future. There was no attack going on when Mr. Alford fired. The cars were stopped. They were not even touching. That act of forcing him off the road was over. Forrest had no gun or weapon of any kind. He was simply sitting in his vehicle and never struck the defendant or the defendant's car. That, ladies and gentlemen, is simply not self-defense under the laws of this state.
Okay. Ace, what do you got before we move to the definitions and what the 4 outcomes of this case can be?
I'm sitting here reading chat and everything and seeing what everybody's putting over there. They're right. I mean, there was. Mama Bear says he was in the process of pushing him off the road. The vehicles weren't touching; they were just his wheels were just turned in that direction. They pulled over during the threat. Remember, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt of 12 people. Not necessarily. A jury can come back with a verdict, and if the judge does not agree with the verdict, he can overrule the verdict. It doesn't happen very often, but that's why he's the one with the robe in the chair. Because he has the power to decide somebody's fate. If he believes that the jury might have been compromised and they come back with a verdict that he doesn't believe that they should have come up with, then he can override that. But in this case, there's a lot of factors that people have to take into consideration, as well as the jury themselves. It's just a matter of how you want to look at it. I mean, I know how I am going to plead this case, and I'll explain my reasoning whenever we get to that part. So, back to you, Birdman.
I'm not too far. I guess I'm not too far from where you're at, Ace. But I do have a different take, different perspective on it. Because there's a lot of different factors I'm looking at as I'm going to go into this this ruling. I like saying that. But there's a lot of different factors I'm trying to take into consideration here, with all the evidence, the eyewitness statements, but also more so the character witness statements. Before I continue, once again, I know we just had somebody join in. We're doing our first episode of a series called "You Be the Judge." We're talking about the case of death of a bully. It's the state versus Jim Alford, who is accused of shooting and killing Wilbur Forrest in an incident that happened on a road, basically in a residential neighborhood. Evidence has been brought forth and testimony from even Mr. Alford's own volition about what happened. Mr. Alford is at the time 57-year-old retired Army major. And with the incident with Mr. Wilbur, or Mr. Forrest, sorry, he had been basically he'd been terrorizing not only Mr. Alford but the entire community. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We've already given all the witness statements, the character witness statements. We've heard from the doctor performed the autopsy. We heard from the police officer that took Mr. Alford in. And like I said, we heard the rest of the evidence after Mr. Alford's testimony. So now we're kind of in the process of where we're about to hear the 4 possible verdicts in the case. And then myself and Ace are gonna render our verdict or what we think it should be. For those in the comments, and I've already gotten, I think, at least 4 people that we have in there. Don't pay attention to the Superman one. That's actually me. I'm actually watching to make sure there's nothing. I'm watching on my other profile to make sure there's nothing going on with the actual recording, and everything looks great. So don't pay attention to the Superman one. He's not going to vote. But so far we've gotten people that have come in for their verdict. After Carrie reads the 4 possible verdicts in the case, then what we'll do is, Ace, what I'll have you do is, I've already written them down for the ones that have said what they thought. If you haven't wrote them down, go back up, write them down. When she gets done, what I want you to do is read off basically the jury's thoughts on what they have found this man to be guilty or not guilty, and then what they're saying his verdict should be before we give ours. Okay. So Carrie, go ahead with the 4 possible verdicts in the case, what their definitions are, so that way, in case someone doesn't know 100% what these are, we can help them out.
Okay, so he was charged with first-degree murder, and the definition for that is occurs when the killing is committed with malice and forethought and deliberate and premeditated intent to kill. Second-degree murder, it occurs when the killing is with malice of forethought but without deliberation and premeditation. Voluntary manslaughter, the intentional killing of a human without malice and aforethought, used in the following circumstances: where the killing is committed during a sudden quarrel or heat of passion, where the killer acts under the stress of heat of passion, where the provocation is such that would naturally arouse such passions, and where the killer acts under the stress, the heat of that passion, where the killing is committed in an honest but reasonable belief in the need to defend against imminent peril to the life or great bodily injury. And lastly, it would be not guilty on the grounds of self defense. Self defense is the killing of another person in self defense is justifiable and therefore not unlawful when the person who does the killing honestly and reasonably believes that there is an imminent danger that the person will kill them or cause them great bodily injury. Imminent means the danger must be immediate. And it's also that it was necessary under the circumstances to kill the other person to prevent death or great bodily injury to himself or herself.
Okay. So, well, for those who are hearing that, and like I said, I've gotten at least 4. Is that what you have, Ace? Okay. We have at least 4 people who've commented where they thought he was guilty or not guilty, and have put their their uh their comment as far as what they thought he should get. And I just seen one just change theirs after reading or after hearing the definitions. So one of the main reasons why I wanted to make sure we did that, because like I said, some people after hearing the definitions, like you hear first degree, second degree, manslaughter, self defense, and you pretty much can formulate what that is. But when you actually hear the definition under the law, it can change your opinion a little bit. So we got one person to change. If anybody wants to change theirs, go ahead at this time before I turn it over to Ace to read the jury's verdict. Going
I
once.
think the only ones that we're missing right now are Julius and Deception King. But Julius just joined, so I don't know if they caught the entire case.
Yeah, I was looking at that. Deception King, are you in here? You haven't said nothing in the comments. What's going on now? What's going on, King? I'll give you a few minutes. Before we do that, hold on. Just lurking.
I
Okay, hey, that's
believe
cool. That's cool.
is lurking behind her.
Yeah, he's back there.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I was about to say, okay, that's cool, but I wouldn't be saying that online because in case somebody look at this, they're gonna be like, what? But anyways, well, thank you for lurking in the background. I appreciate you for being part of this show. Okay, so Ace, what we'll do is let's go ahead. Let's go ahead. What we got? I want you to read out what. First of all, read out what they thought. As far as, well, you don't have to read their names, but how many guilties, how many not guilties, and then you can read out, what they thought.
Okay, so the jury in this case has come back with a split decision. We've got one person who believes that it was murder in the first. We've got one person who believes it was murder in the second. We've got one person who believes that it was a crime of passion, murder, or first degree manslaughter. And then we've got one person who believes that he should be found not guilty on grounds of self-defense. I the judge in this case, here's what I have determined. Although Mr. Alford felt an immediate threat, that's all it was a threat. There was no action perpetrated behind the threat. The fact that he has 27 years of experience in the military and should have been able to handle this situation better. The fact that he reloaded shows excessive force. Although this is the best thing for the neighborhood, but the law is the law. Mr. Alford fired 10 shots at a man with the intent to end his life. My verdict is murder in the second degree. I go with second degree because even though there was excessive force, I do not feel that this was a premeditated murder. That is why it is second and not first.
Okay. I am going to 100% in my verdict rule on the time frame of when this was. I'm not going to rule on it what I think now because of the advancements we've made. And I'm just going to rule on the sheer ignorance of the time. I'm just going to say my verdict is second degree murder, guilty of second degree murder, because of the fact that he did reload. He did continue to fire, and making sure that he was dead. Now, if I was ruling in today's time, it'd be voluntary manslaughter. And the reason why is you have to take into consideration in the fact that he was a vet, especially during Vietnam. The sheer violence that just about every one of those soldiers saw, and I'm speaking from 100%, the nightmares, sometimes seeing the faces of people you may have had to kill or people that were killed around you, and the fact that someone threatening your family. 100%, I would today rule voluntary manslaughter. But because of the ignorance that was during that time, because they weren't really checking on veterans like that, especially from the Vietnam era, they probably didn't even take into account of his service record. They sure as hell didn't take into account of the fact that this man has been a menace. That man had been a menace in that community. The police did absolutely nothing to help ease the community and help that situation whatsoever. So they kind of played a part into all this. But taking that out, and having to rule on just what the facts were, even from the own testimony. And like I said, ruling today would be different because even in his own testimony, the way he's speaking, not being able to, I don't know what I was thinking. That's not what my thoughts were. Is a classic sign of the man having basically a flashback, and he just reacted because of a threat that was before him. But like I said, I right now, because of this and because it was 2006, I have to look at the simple fact of maybe 1 or 2 shots. Okay. But 10 shots and the fact that you followed him down the hill, is where I go. I can't say first degree because I don't think he went out with the intent to shoot him. He had the gun in the car for protection in case something happened, which honestly, that's what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to use it to protect yourself or your family in case something happens. And I think it just happened to be that day that Mr. Forrest decided to be an idiot one more time, and it cost him his life. So my verdict is second degree murder. Yeah. Okay. So Carrie, you got the verdicts. Okay. Both judges are definitely in agreement in what the verdict was. So now you're going to tell us what the verdict actually was and why. But before you do that, I think Ace had something to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify what I was saying earlier. I didn't think it was premeditated. That's why I didn't go with first degree. But had he not reloaded, I would have dropped it down to manslaughter. And had he not followed him down, like Tim said, then we could have been in the ballpark of a case for self-defense. Had he not continued him following him down. I just wanted to go ahead and clarify that.
And I will say, when I read this, I didn't read the verdict until I had read the definitions, and my guess was voluntary manslaughter. Because it doesn't say how long is a heat of passion. It didn't tell us how long it took him to roll down the hill and for the major to follow him down and shoot him. So how long is a heat of passion? So I went with voluntary manslaughter because he was guilty, but I don't think he had any malice in him. Not at the start. It flipped the switch. So the actual verdict in this case, the real life jury found the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree, which was then reduced by the judge to manslaughter.
Oh, we were supposed to do that, huh? Okay, yeah, so we're gonna reduce it to manslaughter.
The sympathy for the defendant and the dislike of the victim persuaded the jury to reduce the charge from first to second degree murder, but the circumstances of the shooting were too damning to warrant a not guilty verdict. At the sentencing hearing, so the jury came back second degree, and then later during the sentencing, which is always a separate court date, the judge actually reduced it down to voluntary manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 10 years in state prison.
Now, see, that's basically what I was saying when I was given my verdict. So that's basically what I was saying. But like I said, I was thinking about during the time. And I honestly, I forgot that we, as judges, could actually, and I know we talked about that earlier in the show, we could actually go, give a different verdict if, and you watch your mouth, Angel, or you'll be next being judged. But yeah, that was pretty cool. I am glad to see that. I mean, justice was served. Hopefully, Mr. Alford is getting or has gotten some help. I'm assuming he's already out because he only got 10 years. So I don't know if he had to serve all 10 years or if he got out early or whatever the deal was. I'm pretty sure it does not say. Okay. So I mean,
No, this
hopefully,
was written.
that he was able to get count. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This was written like 15 years ago.
Okay,
so it was
yeah. So yeah, I mean, hopefully, he was able to get some counseling because I know he's going to definitely need it. If he didn't need it before, he definitely going to need it after that. So hopefully he's got some counseling. Hopefully, and this is why I tell people you gotta be careful when you're out in public, whether you're driving, whether you're walking, you're in the grocery store. Some people, like I used to have a really bad temper, and I would fight at the drop of a hat. Sometimes you didn't even have to drop a hat. I just had to think that a hat fell off somebody's head, and I'm swinging. Um, and I'm very thankful for the time I served in the military because it allowed me to channel that anger, and it actually allowed me to start thinking before I just started swinging. Because here's the thing: I don't care how good you are, care how big you are, I don't care how bad you think you are. There's always somebody bigger, badder, and better than you are. Or if they're not, and they're way weaker than you are, nowadays everybody has a gun, so the playing field is a lot even, a little bit more even. So I always tell people you gotta stop with all this stuff. I tell Des all the time when she out driving and stuff and she yelling at people, on the road, this and that. You might want to stop that because look, even though I don't have a problem going to jail, there's a lot of stuff I still have to do with my life that I'm trying to do. I don't feel like taking time out to go to jail or prison because you start running off at the mouth. Okay, that's just me. All right. Now I've learned how to keep my mouth in check. Carrie, I just want to say you did a phenomenal job. You did a very good job. A very freaking good job. I really enjoyed this. Like I said, it was our first time doing it, so we're kind of trying to fill it out as far as how it goes. We did have some technical issues at the beginning. So I think I know what the problem is. I'll try to get it fixed. But you did a very, very good job, and I do appreciate this topic you brought to us, and I definitely can't wait to get into the next case. So why don't you give us your closing thoughts? Tell us how you felt, and then we'll go to Ace.
I think it went really well. Except for the echo. That's so creepy. Anyway, I think it went really well. I think this was a good case to start with because I had another one picked out, but it got really weird really fast. So I went to the death of the bully, so it was a little bit, no, this was a whole different kind of weird. um, yeah, so I'm glad I went with this case. It was pretty straightforward and it hit you in the feels too at the same time. But yeah, I'm definitely ready to do this again whenever you guys are ready.
I like I said, I appreciate it. But can I ask you a question though? You said the first case was, or the case you're looking at was really weird. Have you not watched the Birdman Show or been on one of Ace's lives or been on the recap and watched what we do on there?
That's different because I was doing all the talking, not you two. So it will be the second case, but I needed something to ease me into this before I jumped into cults.
Ooh, Colts. Oh, like the Indianapolis Colts.
Cult. CULT.
Oh, okay, that too. That too. Those are great. Those are crazy.
No,
Too.
no football.
Yeah, those are
No,
crazy.
we're talking about the ponies running across the pasture. The Broncos.
Yeah, and the Phillies.
You're just gonna keep naming off sports teams.
The donkeys.
The donkeys.
The San Diego Jackasses.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm looking at two jackasses. Does that count?
We are the Kansas Jackasses. Thank you very much.
My bad. My bad.
Ma'am, I am shocked and appalled that you would say something like that about us.
To think that we've already got her on the schedule for the next episode. I think we're going to have to change that shit.
Like, wow. You just going to come at us?
Y'all can do your own research.
No, keep going, Carrie.
No. I mean, that was the whole point of doing this. Hey.
Uh-huh.
Keep it down back there.
Hell no.
Oh God. Well, Ace, what are your thoughts on this this first episode we got a chance to do?
I think it turned out the way that it was supposed to turn out. You did a hell of a job. Hey, that's the only way it could have turned out. What the fuck are you talking about? I'm talking about us, jackass. As far as, yes, we ended up having some technical difficulties in the beginning. I'm sure a lot of it had to do with that one being in the box, but really, anybody but you. But as is the mantra on the Birdman Show, we adapt and overcome. You did a hell of a job, Carrie. this was actually fun. It's a real life case that's actually took place, and it's interesting actually going through and being the judge and actually determining. Well, I mean, we didn't have any power, but figuring out what was going to happen to the victim or the defendant, because the victim's dead. I'm done before I say something else stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. Victim is definitely like Justin Timberlake, dead and gone. Anyways, just to reiterate, yes, Carrie, you did a wonderful job. Really love this. This was a refreshing change from our norm when it comes to some of the episodes that we do. So I really liked it. I really like being able to hear all the evidence and then render our verdict. I was a little. I'll be honest with you. I was a little like, I don't know how this is gonna turn out because you got Ace and myself. We're the ones going to be judging, so uh, we might have just made up some verdicts. But it is what it is. But no, I really enjoyed it. I really did. I liked the audience interaction when it came to it. Audience, real quick, while I'm finishing up my closing remarks, please put in the chat if you enjoyed this, and are definitely ready or definitely wanting to see another episode of You Be the Judge. That being said, I definitely, like I said, I want to thank Carrie for this topic and for being on the podcast. Definitely got to thank my boy Ace for being on once again and rocking with me on the Birdman Show. Mama Bear is definitely a go for this one. All right, cool. That's awesome.
I do.
Just to remind everybody, once again, real quick, Ace, remind everybody what's going on.
Well, I've got a statement, a question, and then the what's going on after this. The statement is, this fucking sucks because you don't ever fucking shut up long enough for me to get a word in edgewise. That's why I'm always cutting you off, and I can't fucking do it now. That's the statement. The question is, what fucking filter do you have on? I know your ass ain't that fucking tan. Not in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
It's a light. It's a light. You can't see it, but it's called a groove light, and I can change it to different hues.
Maybe I need to scoot my light further away from me because I look like...
You look like Casper right now. You need to do something.
Man. You just pasty, so it don't
You're
even matter.
glowing in the dark.
Hey, if you're lost, come and get me. It is on fucking Yeller. All right, but now for my statement. After the Birdman Show, if you guys ain't got nothing, I mean, I know you just spent the last 2 hours with us, but if you have nothing else to do after this, jump over on TikTok with us from 8 to 10 p.m. Central Time. We're over there doing trivia, having a good time, keeping the fucking laughter going. If you ain't got nothing to do, come on over and find us. Yeah, that is TLB-ACE. Come find me.
Yes, definitely. It is a great time. Like I said, Tyler Perry for the win. So yeah, we got that. We got the trivia going on about to come up in 2 minutes. Don't forget that the Birdman Show recap is going to be Thursday, 6 p.m. Central Time over on my TikTok platform. And all you have to do is go to @Birdman Show. And you can join us tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Central Time for that. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a pretty good recap for this one as well. So I am definitely looking forward to that. Don't forget, you can catch not only this episode, if you aren't able to watch it live, you can catch this episode and past episodes on our YouTube channel over at Birdman Show Podcast 9643, or just by simply typing in Birdman Show Podcast. If you want to consider joining our Patreon and contributing to our show, just go to patreon.com/the Birdman Show. once again, I really I am smiling from ear to ear because this was a really fun episode. So I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you, Carrie, so very much for bringing this one to us. And we're definitely going to have to make sure. I don't know if we have it on the schedule yet when we're doing this one again, but we do. I was about to say if we need to move a couple of episode 10 or 11, well, we might end up moving a couple of them because I kind of want to get back into this. But anyway, we will figure that out. We'll let you know. What Ace, real quick, what's the one we're doing for next week? Because I completely forgot.
I want to say next week's Toy Box Murder.
Ooh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wanting to say that's for next week.
Okay, yeah. If you don't know anything about the Toy Box murders, Jesus, yeah, that's gonna be. It's yeah. We might have to come back to Carrie after that one because good God, that was ugh. Okay. So yeah, so join us next week at right here on Squadcast, our new platform powered by the Script, for our new episode next week on Toy Box Murders. It's going to be yeah. If you thought the cult one you were thinking about bringing up, yeah, this one. If like I said, if you don't know anything about it, you definitely want to tune in next week. So once again, I want to thank you from the Birdman Show. We will see you guys next week. Actually, Ace and I will probably see you on trivia if you decide to come over, and we'll definitely catch you on the recap. But we'll definitely, most definitely, catch you next week right here, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Central Time. Good God, I'm going from all over the place. Central Time. Stop laughing, Carrie. It's not funny. You know what? I'm done. Birdman out.